Yo guys, how are you doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review, and today we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to do a mini Q&A. So earlier today on Twitter, I thought it would be fun to just ask you guys to ask me one question, and my intent was to pick one question, some sort of gaming or Nintendo topic, and just discuss that and make a whole video around that one topic. I thought that would be a lot of fun. I used to do that a lot more often, as opposed to just the wider Q&As where I get like 15 questions and do like a 45-minute video about it. And I thought, you know, it's been a while since I did that, and I wasn't sure which topics I really felt like sort of discussing. And I actually got quite a few pretty good questions. And so once I started sifting through them, I was like, you know, I should probably just pick a couple questions. And I thought it would be fun to sort of do this, like I said, as a mini Q&A. So I've got three pretty fun questions here that I wanted to discuss, give you guys some shout outs, and kind of talk about some of the news. So, of course, I do always like to remind you guys before I get into these that you are, of course, invited to, if you would like, follow me on Twitter. Or Facebook. I do, of course, have a Facebook for Rule of Two Review as well, but I'm far more active on Twitter, and that's usually where I engage with you guys, and I'll give you the opportunities to ask me questions, to receive shout-outs on videos, and to answer in my polls and stuff that I like to do a lot as well. So fun, good stuff as always. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and discuss some of these pretty interesting and really good questions that you guys asked me today. So we're going to start off with the biggest one here, and I think the most immediately relevant. So this question comes from Nawaf Al-Mohaisin. I really hope I pronounced your name right. I'm sure I butchered it. But here she goes, at RuleBreakerX01. So we're going to go with at RuleBreaker. So, at RuleBreaker asks me, what is your thoughts on the Nintendo and Gamevice lawsuit debacle that has recently occurred? Why do you think Gamevice has given a lawsuit? So obviously he or she is asking, like I said, the big zeitgeist question right now. A lot of us probably know that currently Nintendo is being sued over what this company claims is their patent that is very similar to what the Nintendo Switch is. So Gamevice is a company that has a device that is really just akin to like a controller peripheral that slides onto the bottom of a tablet, a typical everyday Android or Apple tablet. And it slides on, and it's pretty nifty looking for what it is, I have to say. I don't want to necessarily slam the device, although I don't really know the quality. I don't know if it's considered a good product that works well or not. But as far as the concept and seeing it in action, like, it looks fine. You slide it onto a tablet, and you've got typical controllers that feel like an Xbox controller. It's got the standard sort of layout with the thumbsticks and all that, and you can just play, you know, myriad different app video games that you can download through your app stores on your tablets and play them like a regular video game. Now, what's happening here is Gamevice is saying that Nintendo has stolen their ideas, stolen their patent. They own this idea, they own this trademark and this patent for this concept, and Nintendo has stolen it for the Switch, because of course the Switch also features controllers that slide on and off to a tablet-like device for the purposes of gaming. And they make this claim as far as why they're deciding to do this, which kind of answers the question here you're asking. This is their quote: Nintendo's infringement has caused and is continuing to cause damage and irreparable injury to Gamevice. So, the wording and phrasing of that is very important here, and bear with me because I'm going to pretend like I really am qualified enough to break down the law and the way these kinds of phrases actually, what they actually imply when stated from somebody who's making a claim to somebody who's defending a claim. Obviously, I'm not this person. I'm just a gamer and a dude on the internet. My day job is not related to this at all, but the reason I think that phrasing is important is a few things. It says Nintendo's infringement has caused blah, 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 blah. And so what they're basically saying is that really doubles down on the idea that they own this concept and Nintendo is taking it. Nintendo is infringing on their concept of controllers that slide onto a tablet or whatever. And they talk about how it's continuing to cause damage and irreparable injury to Gamevice. So the idea behind that is they're stating, and again, this is answering your question here, they're claiming that by Nintendo simply having a device that they feel is identical, if not extremely similar to what theirs is, that people the general consumer and the buying market may confuse the two products, and that Nintendo might have, in stealing their idea, might be stealing some possible revenue, because people would say, oh, the Gamevice and the Switch, they're the same thing, right? So, you know, I'm just buying the product that is the one product out there where you slide controllers on for the sake of gaming. Or people may say, and obviously they will and should say this, well, I'd rather have a Switch than that weird little Gamevice peripheral thing that just slides onto my tablet because the Switch seems cooler. And that's the real crux, of course, as to why this is happening, is they understand that Nintendo has a more compelling product that is more interesting, that has more media and attention right now, and they obviously want to try to find any sort of way to recoup any revenue that they feel might be lost, and it's a great way to get their name into the news, and it's a great way to get their product out there. So at the end of the day, legal mumbo-jumbo aside, I don't really think it's any more complicated than that. Basically what's happening is they have a device that they feel Nintendo stole. It's just that simple. And I feel like, obviously, trying to set my bias aside, trying to not be the guy who's just a Nintendo fan and just a gaming fan who wants to defend a company, I mean, let's look objectively at this here. They're not that similar. Yes, there are devices that slide onto a thing, a screen that plays video games, but they're fairly different in the sense that Nintendo themselves created the entire device. They're the ones who actually own the console, the hardware itself, the computing power, the graphics processor, the screen, the actual hardware is Nintendo's, and then they also have their own controllers that slide on in a completely different fashion and also contain an insane amount of technology and abilities and capabilities that the Gamevice obviously does not. And again, I'm not sitting here to like slam the product of the Gamevice because it seems fine. I totally get what it's trying to do, and some people who love mobile gaming probably like the idea of this device, and if it's a quality device, then it's probably a fine thing to exist. Now, as far as I know, the Gamevice controller thing has existed for a while. I think it's been on the market for over a year, maybe a couple of years, but I'm pretty sure it's like around a year, maybe a year and a half. Regardless, it's been out for a while, well before the Nintendo Switch launched, so you can start to see their sort of thought process when they're like, oh, we have this thing that slides onto a thing, and then Nintendo releases this, and everyone's paying attention to that and talking about it, and they're getting on news coverage and selling millions and millions of units and making millions of dollars. We want some of that. I bet we can sort of squeeze in this BS lawsuit and try to get some attention and maybe even win the lawsuit, which there is no way I can possibly see them winning that lawsuit, but they're probably thinking, we can win this lawsuit, and then we get all this money back, and hooray for us. So it's a little sloppy, it's a little messy. We've seen stuff like this happen for many video game companies in the past. We've seen it happen to Nintendo as well, but these companies, and a company as big as Nintendo, I have to assume Gamevice is a much smaller company. And again, a reminder, their device plugs into hardware that other companies are making. They've literally made an accessory, a peripheral. It's not the same as what the Switch is as an all-encompassing unit that happens to come apart and piece back together. It's like I said, we've seen this stuff happen before. I mean, like I was saying, Nintendo is a smart company with a lot of money who's been doing this for a long time. They know how to create a product and patent it and copyright it and stamp their Nintendo seal on it in a way that doesn't infringe illegally on another company's product. I guarantee you that whatever they did to make the Switch the way they did, they made sure it doesn't infringe on something like whatever this Gamevice is. I mean, they're not... Just take a look at how they made like the Wii controllers. I mean, you had the Wii controllers and you had Sony making the Move, and they're so vastly similar, but there's obviously enough legal differences so that Nintendo did not have any recourse to go after Sony. It's just like these companies, and in the technology and hardware world, there are ways to do things that are incredibly similar, seemingly similar on the surface, but that actually turn out to fall within the legal guidelines of it's different here, it's different there, and then it's okay. A great example that I can speak to as a musician who writes and performs music is music and songwriting. You can have two songs that sound almost to the naked ear, if you want to call it the naked ear, they sound almost identical, and you could be like, oh, well, this band obviously stole the music from this band. But if you change one or two notes, or put a couple of notes or phrases or bars in a different key, no matter how initially similar it may seem, if it is factually a different key or a different octave, it's not the same song. And suddenly that song is protected, and the originating artist cannot sue or claim any sort of theft against the newer artist because, hey, it may sound similar, it may share a similar structure or even a similar chord progression, but if it's actually different in key, octave, or tone or melody, you can't do anything. It's a separate product all of a sudden just because of that one little loophole difference. And it's obviously the same way in the technology market. And that is why I think Nintendo is probably going to be safe here. I think we're literally just seeing a company who's a smaller company who wants to try to just get more money and become more popular and get their product out there. I mean, if anything, this is all free advertising and free marketing. So assuming the fallout of this doesn't absolutely destroy them, which I don't really know why it would destroy them, I think they're going to be fine. They've gotten their product out there. They ain't getting a damn thing from Nintendo. I just don't see it playing out that way. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legal guy, but I just feel like we've seen this happen too many times. And Nintendo and other companies like Nintendo always come out on top. Like I said, that was the big topic for the video, so I had quite a bit more to say about that. That was definitely a pretty long answer there, but it's an interesting scenario happening there, and thanks so much for asking that question and giving me a reason to talk about it on a video. The next question I want to get to, again on Twitter, comes from Ryan Bonnell, at BonnellRyan. And Ryan asks me, would you have preferred a Metroid game on the Switch like Super Metroid? So my answer to this might surprise you a little bit. I mean, initially, you might want to jump on that, and I thought this. I almost wanted to jump on that and be like, yes, oh my god, yes, that's what I would like. And then I stopped myself, and I'm like, well, you know, I don't necessarily know that that's exactly what I would want. Obviously, I love the 2D side-scrolling Metroid games, and I've talked about this many times. Yes, Metroid Prime, the first-person 3D Metroid Prime is my favorite Metroid and my favorite game of all time, but I still can say, objectively, personally, that I feel Metroid ultimately shines in 3D. With the exception of that first Prime game, even though I love the other two as well, with the exception of that first Prime game, I still think that all the other best Metroid games, for the most part, are 2D games. And so I'm all about a 2D game. I'm all about another game that's like Super Metroid. And it's why Samus Returns has me so excited. Beyond the obvious, it's a Metroid game and it's Samus again and it looks great. But it's a 2D side-scrolling game and I'm really excited to see how that plays out. So at first I wanted to be like, yes, instead of Metroid Prime 4, I would rather have had like another game just like Super Metroid, only on the Switch, using amazing graphics and taking advantage of the power of the console and this amazing hand-drawn art style and all these cool things that they could have done with it. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I would still like that, but my preference, before the Metroid Prime 4 announcement, my preference for a Switch Metroid game, I think probably still wouldn't have been that, because I still feel like ultimately I would have liked to see that show up on an actual handheld like the 3DS, something that doesn't require the power, not a handheld like the Switch, but a handheld like the 3DS, and we got that, so that's pretty great. I started to realize, you know, honestly, the thing I wanted even more than Metroid Prime 4, and I have discussed this, was just a brand new Metroid game. And it could have been anything. It could have been a different game that would have been in first person. It could have been a 2D game, sure. It could have been a game that was like Other M. I've talked about this many times. I think the gameplay style for Other M is a very solid foundation to make a better game with, and I would have absolutely welcomed another game, a better game that was played and looked just like Other M. Or it could have been just a straight up third person, I don't want to necessarily say open world, but just a third person action exploration puzzle solving game, something that looked like how Bayonetta looks. I mean, Bayonetta is just a third person behind the shoulder action game. You're running around doing all these things. Imagine a Metroid sort of gameplay style using that perspective and that camera angle and that level of freedom to move about and to always see Samus in the third person. I kind of was like, you know, I want some sort of mix of all of these different things. I didn't necessarily want a first-person Prime, and I didn't necessarily want a straight-up 2D side-scrolling Super Metroid kind of game or sequel. I wanted something that could have just been, honestly, a kind of Metroid game we've never seen, or a revisiting and a perfecting of the Other M style, something in third person. And ultimately what we're getting is another first-person Metroid Prime. I've talked about it so many times. I did not see that coming. I thought that for sure the Prime games were going to be done and we would not see that. But I was wrong, and I mean, I'm happy about it. I cannot wait for Prime 4. I mean, obviously a fourth game in my favorite game series of all time. Bring it on. I can't wait. But it's a really good question, because I think that a lot of people forget how many different ways Metroid can play. And I think a lot of people, especially the younger gamers, maybe forget that Metroid started off in 2D, and in my opinion is still best in 2D. And I know it's weird because Prime is my favorite game, and I know that that's weird. It's just the way it is and how I feel about it. Prime is my favorite game, but I still think Metroid is best in 2D. And so there's all these different ways we could have seen a Metroid game. And Other M, I know because people didn't like it, people forget about that gameplay style, but I think that people would do wise not to forget about it. And last point on this, I've talked about this also. Samus Returns is borrowing heavily from the aesthetic and some of the melee combat gameplay styles from Other M. So we are seeing Nintendo sort of remember that Other M did exist. Most people didn't like it. It sold okay. I think it maybe almost cracked 1 million. It wasn't a disaster in the sales department, although it wasn't probably the hit they wanted it to be. But I think Nintendo's like, well, we don't want to forget about it, and we don't want people to forget about it. So maybe eventually we'll get another game in that style that, like I said, is tweaked and a little bit better. But, yeah, I think that's my answer is, I was expecting a different kind of game, but at the end of the day, there's not a single Metroid game I would ever turn down. Okay, this last question is actually the one I was most excited to answer, and I almost made this the only question for the video, but I realized it wasn't probably long enough, and you know me, I like to make longer videos. I like to provide nice 12, 15, 20-minute video content for you guys at a time. You kind of get more bang for your buck, even though you're not spending a buck. Anyway, this is a really good question, and something pretty important to talk about. So, Eric Sweeney at Mr. Schweens, I love that name, on Twitter does ask me, holiday 2018 Switch title, Metroid or Pokemon? So, this is a really, really great question. I think a lot of people have kind of stopped paying attention to some of how E3 played out. And a lot of people haven't really been talking as much about Pokemon, which, at least in the circles I travel, which surprises me because Pokemon is huge and everyone loves it. I'm not a Pokemon guy, but it's a big deal. And the fact that at E3 they announced that new Pokemon Core RPG Switch game is a massive, massive deal. But still, the conversation's kind of dwindled around it, and I really like that what Eric has noticed here is, hey, we have these two massive, hotly anticipated, high-profile Switch-exclusive Nintendo games that were announced that are very early in development. We have no indication as to when they're going to release, so we don't know what's going to come out first and when they're going to release and any of that stuff, what's going on there. So he's asking me, between Metroid Prime 4 or the new Pokemon game, which game is the most likely big holiday game for next year, for 2018? And man, there's a couple of really interesting ways to look at this, because obviously Nintendo has to have a big holiday game. Every company does, or at least they try to. And Nintendo does have these great two nebulous, weird, mysterious games floating in the future. New Metroid, new Pokemon. So one of these games is going to predate the other. You'd have to think that they both make excellent candidates for the big, ideal, primetime holiday release title for Nintendo's new console for 2018, 2019, 2020, whatever. These are great candidates to be those games, and you would have to think, just speculating here, it's a very good chance that they both are individually holiday titles for different years. I mean, their development may even be 1 year apart. And so, which game is more likely for holiday 2018? So there's two answers here. For me, and this is going to surprise you, the first answer is I do think Metroid Prime is probably the most likely to release before Pokemon. So I feel like Metroid Prime would be the game most likely to release in holiday 2018. Now the caveat to that is, I've discussed this, you guys have heard me, I don't put my money on Metroid releasing as early as holiday 2018. To me, it feels like a 2019 game. Obviously, no one knows. I can feel 2019, you can feel 2018, and one of us is wrong, but only Nintendo knows the true answer. So it could release whenever. Maybe it comes out next month and Nintendo's trolling us. But I personally feel that it's going to be 2019 that we see Metroid Prime 4. But regardless of that, let's say it is ready to come out 2018, I still think that Pokemon is even farther off. I feel like it's something that is, gosh, could I say it's a bigger project? I mean, those Metroid Prime games are so involved, so advanced, and use very, very detailed and next-level engines. And I feel like Metroid Prime is probably going to be, at the time it releases, Metroid Prime 4 will be the best-looking game on the Switch. And it might even be the best-looking game throughout the life of the Switch. I mean, that's what that game is going to be. Pokemon won't be that, but Pokemon being a huge, epic RPG, which is a very complicated, involved sort of game to make, and the fact that as much as I love Metroid, Pokemon is the bigger franchise and the bigger series by far, I think Nintendo's also going to put that much more time into it to make sure it's a huge game, that it's got a very large scope, that there's a ton of options, there's probably going to be online stuff, I would assume, and it's got to satisfy a gigantic legion of Pokemon fans. And considering that they're both mysterious, we got nothing from them other than announcements for both of these titles. They're very far off. If I had to pick which one is coming first, it's Metroid Prime. If I had to pick which one is most likely holiday 2018, well, I've got to say Prime because I think it's coming out first. But like I said, there are two answers here. And my other answer is honestly sticking to my initial gut feeling. And I think neither of those games most likely are going to be coming out in 2018 at all. Neither of them will probably be a 2018 holiday title. Just my theory and speculation. This is just me guessing and putting my theory out there, guys. I just don't think so. And so then the big question becomes, well, what will Nintendo have? If that's true, what would Nintendo release for holiday next year? And it's like, well, we've already had Mario Kart 8. It is a remaster of a last-gen game, but we've had a Mario Kart game. We've had a Zelda game, but then we will have had a brand new Mario game, and we're also getting Xenoblade this year. You know, that doesn't leave too many options. I actually, to me, that leaves two viable options. I don't think it's going to be Mario Kart 9. I feel like that game is farther away, even though 8 is a remaster. I feel Mario Kart 9 is farther away. I don't yet think that we're ready to see a Star Fox or an F-Zero. I feel like it's going to be one of two things. One would be Fire Emblem, because that is, we know, a big, huge first-party game coming out, as of right now, 2018, for the Nintendo Switch. Not Fire Emblem Warriors, but the brand new actual Fire Emblem game designed for the Nintendo Switch. I think that that's a tough sell as far as like the wide-reaching, big, hard-hitting main holiday title. I mean, I know Fire Emblem is huge and getting bigger all the time, but I don't know that it feels like that big holiday title. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm happy for Nintendo to make it that game. I do think it's possible. The other one, and this would actually be disappointing to me, you guys, but I think that there's a good chance that it is this game, and maybe that is when we finally see the Smash Brothers remaster of the Wii U Super Smash Brothers. That's a game that a lot of people have been thinking has been coming for a long time. I've been wishy-washy on it, but Nintendo has showed that there are a lot of last-gen ports from the Wii U and other consoles that are coming over to the Switch. You know, we're getting Skyrim, we're getting Rayman, we're getting probably another one I'm brain farting. We got Pokken and Mario Kart. Like, you know what? Yeah, Smash Brothers is probably going to come. As opposed to a new Smash, they're going to release a remaster, Smash Brothers Deluxe, Wii U, whatever. And that's fine. And you know what? I think there's a very good chance that that is a game, considering the fact that Zelda and Mario aren't options, by the way, and that I'm personally ruling out Metroid and Pokemon. I feel like that leaves either Fire Emblem or, more likely, the Smash Brothers remake or remaster, whatever. So those are my guesses. So to answer your question directly, Metroid or Pokemon, more than likely I feel like it would be Metroid first. But beyond that, it's either Fire Emblem or Smash Brothers Remake. Mark my words, we're going to see one of those games show up holiday next year, 2018. So that's it, guys, for this kind of mini Q&A. Just 3 quick Twitter questions that I wanted to answer because I think they all created some pretty interesting and fun Nintendo and Switch conversations for me to discuss and hopefully for you guys to enjoy. So, of course, as always, thank you guys so much for responding so well whenever I put call-outs out there for you guys to ask me questions on Twitter and Facebook or whatever. I got a bunch of really good questions, and I really enjoyed picking just a few to make a shorter video. You know, this isn't 45 minutes. This is probably whatever, 15 minutes or whatever it is. And I kind of like that. That's pretty cool. So hopefully you guys enjoy. What do you think about this stuff? The Gamevice lawsuit, I think, is the biggest topic here. But I really enjoyed talking about the holiday 2018 title. I think it's going to be really interesting. What do you think about my guesses and theories and everything that I discussed on today's video? Thanks again, of course, for tuning in and for asking questions. Again, if you want, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook to be involved with these in the future. That is it for now. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.